Good morning. It's wonderful to be here this morning. I'm proud to be a Rotarian. I'm just delighted to be here at this Zone Institute. I want to thank Roy for a very generous introduction. I was thinking about the changes that Alan was referring to, and then thinking about some of the things that Roy just said. Transformations and transitions, and I would just like to mention one of the larger changes in my life. One month I was president of a university. The next month, I was a student in a dormitory at USC in LA with a 17-year-old roommate. Male. And I think we could certify that he was the most disappointed freshman in the history of higher education. Traveled all the way from Virginia to LA for freedom! And they gave him a roommate older than his father. But we got along really well. We became good friends. I really appreciated Alan's words, and Alan's going to be back up here in a while. We'll answer some questions and build a little discussion together. But that was a real treat, Alan. Thank you for that. I want to talk about something that I think is very important and very Rotarian, and that is servant leadership. Servant leadership is a philosophy or attitude toward leadership that incorporates the four-way test. The dominant model of leadership in our culture now is the power model. And I don't know what it was like for you when you were growing up. But when I was growing up, when people talked about leadership, it always seemed to be about power. That leadership was about acquiring power and wielding power and making people do things. That it was about attacking and winning, clever strategies, applying pressure, and maybe not worrying too much about the morals or ethics of leadership decisions. I've learned over the last 30 years that there are some severe disadvantages with the power model. First of all, it emphasizes having power, not necessarily using it wisely. Secondly, it tends to promote conflict between power groups, because people want to be leaders. They figure, well, I've got to get power. They build a power base. Pretty soon they're in power groups, and these groups are so busy fighting each other, it's very hard for them to find time to focus on solving problems or seizing opportunities. Third, the power model defines success in terms of who gains more power, not in terms of who does the most good for their organization or community or society at large. Those are some very serious drawbacks to the power model. I think it's even worse, though, for the leader herself or himself. And there are two reasons. First of all, the leader who's in the power model always wants what that person wants. I mean, I'm the leader, I'm in the power model. I want to make people do things. I want certain things to happen. It's me, me, me. And pretty soon that leader becomes disconnected from the people she or he is supposed to be serving. Even worse, I have never met anyone who wanted power and could get enough. Power becomes an addiction. It's like a disease. People get a little and they say, well, you know, if I had more power, I'd be happy. And they get more power and they're still not happy. Well, if I had more power, I'd be happy. They get more power, they're still not happy. It leads to spiritual corruption and a life of self-torment. Now, there is another model, and you know all about it. And this model has been around for thousands of years. It's the service model. And people who live the service model are often referred to as servant leaders. The service model is really evident in many great traditions, in Christianity, in the Taoist tradition, and certainly in the Rotary tradition. Service above self is a great motto for servant leaders. I know there are servant leaders in Rotary clubs all over the world working hard for their clubs and their communities. I know there are many servant leaders right here in this room this morning. And I say, bless you. Well, who then is a servant leader? I think a servant leader is just a leader who loves people and wants to help them. Servant leaders derive a lot of meaning and satisfaction from just loving and helping others. So the servant leader doesn't start out by saying, you know, how can I get power? How can I make people do things? The servant leader says, what do people need? How can I help them to get it? What does my organization need to do? How can I help my organization to do it? So rather than embarking on a quest for personal power, the servant leader embarks upon a quest to identify and meet the needs of others. That's the mission of the servant leader. That's the key phrase. Identify and meet the needs of others. There are a couple of ways we could contrast the power model and the service model. My favorite ones are these. A person in the power model wants to make people do things. A servant leader wants to help people do things. That's why servant leaders are often facilitators and coordinators and partners and healers and builders. Another contrast is this. In the power model, all the attention is paid to the traditional organizational hierarchy, right? It's like a pyramid. The president, prime minister, whoever is at the top, and then the vice president, deputy prime minister, and it goes all the way down the pyramid to the people at the lowest level who deliver the services or produce the products. And the assumption in the power model is only the people at the top have power. In the service model, the hierarchy really isn't important. It's not really relevant. Because anybody in any family, group, organization, or community, anybody can identify and meet the needs of others. Anybody can be a servant leader. Now, we live in a real world. Power abhors a vacuum. Somebody is going to exercise power. A servant leader can exercise power. The servant leader can get angry and enter the fray to do battle. But the servant leader exercises power and does battle on behalf of others. On behalf of others. The servant leader responds to the way other people are being treated, not to the way she or he is being treated. Servant leaders are all kinds of people. We all have our own backgrounds, our own experiences, our own gifts, our own personalities. What servant leaders have in common is they'll go into a situation, a group, a family, an organization, a club, and they'll say, you know, is there a missing link here? Is there a gap? Is there some kind of blockage that's making it hard for this group to achieve what it wants to achieve? And if so, can I identify what that gap or missing link or blockage is? And if I can identify it, can I do something about it? And if I can't, can I find someone who can do something about it? So what the servant leader does each time will be different, because each situation is different. But the servant leader begins by watching and listening. Watching and listening. The servant leader doesn't begin with the answer, the program, the policy, or the procedure. The servant leader begins by asking people, what are your hopes and dreams? What are your wants and needs? The servant leader begins by identifying the needs of others. And that's really effective. That is very effective, because if we're able to identify needs, we've got a really good opportunity to meet those needs. And if we're good at identifying and meeting needs, we will have members and customers and clients and patients and students and participants. We will be effective. Servant leaders can be kings or queens, military commanders, business leaders, nonprofit leaders, families, friends, neighbors, coaches. And they do the things that leaders do. I mean, they articulate a vision. They motivate. They communicate. They manage. They do all the things that leaders do. What I think distinguishes them is two things. First, they are focused on others, not just themselves. And secondly, they're working hard to make life better for others, not just for themselves. That's their motivation. That's what distinguishes them wherever you find them, whatever their title or position or role in society. That difference in focus and motivation is easiest to see, I think, in the decisions that people make every day. A power-oriented leader who sits down to make a decision asks a different set of questions than a servant leader. A power-oriented leader will ask questions like this. What decision will enhance my power? What decision will make me look good? What decision will be a great way to get ahead of my chief rival? What decision will improve my relationship with my boss? What decision will position me best for my promotion? All power-oriented questions about the leader who's making the decision. A servant leader asks a different set of questions. What needs should we be addressing? What decisions need to be made? If we address this need, is there another one that really is more important that we should be addressing first? If we address this need, are we going to harm someone or leave someone out? Is there going to be some harm that we can mitigate or reduce? What decision would be most consistent with the mission and values and goals of my organization? Those are different kinds of questions. And this is where the four-way test fits so perfectly. The questions that are asked in the four-way test are the questions servant leaders should ask and do ask. You notice they are not questions about power. They're questions about how we pay attention to other people. Are we truthful with them? Are we being fair to them? Are we building those good relationships with them? Are we sharing the benefits? Are we concerned that it be beneficial to all those concerned? Those are the right questions for servant leaders. The four-way test is a wonderful core set of questions for people who are effective servant leaders. Now, you ask these different sets of questions, you get different answers, and you get different decisions. And over time, the power-oriented leader and the servant leader move in different directions. Basically, the power-oriented leader moves toward the things that she or he wants, whereas the servant leader moves toward the things that other people need. A big difference. Well, we've been talking about who is a servant leader and how they behave. Let me ask this question. Why do people become servant leaders? Why would somebody want to be a servant leader? Well, I think some people become servant leaders because they find the teaching in the scriptures or in a particular philosophy and they become committed. I think most servant leaders, though, kind of back into the idea, and they do it by making a couple of important decisions. The first one's a moral decision, and the second one is where to find the most meaning in life. Here's the moral decision. When you know that people have needs, I think you've only got three options. Now, I know the world's a complicated place, and there are all kinds of gray areas, but I think you've really only got three options. First, you can ignore the needs of others. An option I consider a moral failure. Secondly, you can exploit the needs of others, take advantage of them for your own personal gain. An option I consider an even worse moral failure. And third, you can help. You can help. You can try to meet people's needs. Now, only the third option is moral. And servant leaders decide that that's what they're going to do. That's where they're going to live. That's the option they're going to stay with, no matter how difficult it becomes. Whether they're winning or losing, whether they're being appreciated or being ignored, whatever it is, they're going to keep going. That's the only moral option. Because if they stay with that option, they get a lot of meaning and satisfaction. And that's enough. That's enough. I think I was really fortunate to learn this early in life. And I remember exactly when the idea occurred to me. I was walking into the stadium at Roosevelt High School over here in Honolulu for the awards assembly my senior year. And as I was walking into the stadium, I was thinking about what awards I might get. And partway into the stadium, it occurred to me, I felt so good about what I'd done and who I'd helped and what we'd accomplished together. I felt so good about that I didn't need any awards. I had already been rewarded. I'd already been rewarded with the meaning and satisfaction that came from doing all those things. And that was a moment of tremendous liberation for me, a moment of real inner peace. A couple of years later, I was in college. It was the 60s. Some of you, you're probably too young, but a few of you might remember the 60s. I had a gentleman come up to me and say, if you lived through the 60s and you remember the 60s, you didn't live through the 60s. I have no idea what he meant by that. I was working with high school student leaders, and it was a provocative time, a lot of conflict and confrontation, also a lot of hope and idealism. And I wanted to challenge them. And I challenged them with 149 words that I wrote for them in a little student leadership manual. And I called those words the Paradoxical Commandments. And there are copies for you in the back. There are little posters and bookmarks. They're free. They're my gift to you. If you'd like them, please take them with you. This is what I wrote. People are illogical, unreasonable, and self-centered. Love them anyway. If you do good, people will accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Do good anyway. If you're successful, you'll win false friends and true enemies. Succeed anyway. The good you do today will be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Honesty and frankness make you vulnerable. Be honest and frank anyway. The biggest men and women with the biggest ideas can be shot down by the smallest men and women with the smallest minds. Think big anyway. People favor underdogs but follow only top dogs. Fight for a few underdogs anyway. What you spend years building may be destroyed overnight. Build anyway. People really need help but may attack you if you do help them. Help people anyway. And finally, give the world the best you have and you'll get kicked in the teeth. Give the world the best you have anyway. 10 Paradoxical Commandments. The Paradoxical Commandments are guidelines for finding personal meaning in the face of adversity. So each one begins with a statement that's difficult, that's about adversity. People are illogical, unreasonable, and self-centered, or the good you do today will be forgotten tomorrow, or people really need help but may attack you if you do help them. But each statement of adversity is followed by the positive commandment. Love people anyway. Do good anyway. Help people anyway. The paradox is this: even when the world out there is difficult, even when the world out there is crazy, you and I can still find personal meaning and deep happiness. We do that by facing the worst in the world with the best in ourselves. Facing the worst in the world with the best in ourselves. You and I know, we know that as individuals we can't control all kinds of things that go on in the world. I mean, as individuals we can't control the world economy or population growth or natural disasters like fires and floods, or when a hurricane will hit, or when a terrorist might strike, or when a war might break out, or which company is going to buy which company, and which jobs will be created and which ones will be eliminated. There's so many things that we can't control. We can work hard, we can prepare, we can seize opportunities. We've got to do that. We can join with others to influence all those external events. We ought to do that. But there's so many things that as individuals we just can't control. What we can control is our inner lives. You and I get to decide who we're going to be and how we're going to live. And we can live our most cherished values, and we can be close to our family and friends, and we can do what we know is right and good and true no matter what. No matter what. And the good news is, that's where people have been finding a lot of meaning for a long, long time. And even better news is personal meaning is a key to being deeply happy. Well, what am I thinking of in terms of deep happiness? I'm thinking of something that really touches your spirit, something that really connects with your soul. There are a lot of phrases people use when they try to describe that. Talk about self-fulfillment and self-actualization and being centered. People of faith may talk about finding God's will for their lives and living that will. But whatever it is, personal meaning is a key to being deeply happy. Some people look at the Paradoxical Commandments as a personal declaration of independence. I can be independent from all that stuff out there that's happening when it comes to finding meaning and happiness. I can find it anyway. The other people look at the commandments as a no excuses policy. Okay, people are illogical, unreasonable, self-centered. So what? That's no excuse. Gotta love them anyway. You don't want to limit your life by limiting your love. Gotta love them anyway. Well, the good you do today will be forgotten tomorrow. So what? That's no excuse. You don't run out and do bad. You still got to do good. That's who you are. That's your character. That's where the meaning comes from. You got to do good anyway. I think it's 3 times now somebody's come up to me after a presentation and basically said, you know, Ken, you must have been having a really bad year when you wrote these things. Well, what can I say? I mean, I was a sophomore in college. I was 19 when I wrote the Paradoxical Commandment. And I have admitted publicly that I couldn't get a date. Actually, it was worse than that. I could get a date, and then I'd spend the evening talking about the meaning of life. And then I couldn't get the next date. So I had a lot of time on Friday and Saturday night to write things for student leaders, like the Paradoxical Commandments. So embarrassing. Life is very humbling, isn't it? I mean, none of this would have happened to me if I'd had a normal social life. I was optimistic then. I'm optimistic now. I believe that if you go out and do what's right and good and true, you will often be successful. You'll often be recognized. You'll often be rewarded. So the question is, what if you aren't? What if you put your heart, mind, and soul into it, and the project fails? What if you do a brilliant job, and nobody notices? And the answer is, so what? So what? You still got to be who you got to be. You still got to do what you got to do. You still got to live your most cherished values and be close to your family and friends and do what you know is right and good and true, because that's where you're going to find the most meaning. That's where you're going to find the deep happiness. And you don't want to give that up. You don't want to ever give that up. Certainly not when times are tough. Certainly not then. Well, I wrote the Paradoxical Commandments in a little booklet for student leaders. It was called The Silent Revolution, Dynamic Leadership in the Student Council. A few of you may have missed that particular volume. And it was 1968, and we published it. We sold 25,000 to 30,000 copies around the country, and that was great. And I went on with my life, extended my adolescence as long as possible, went to 5 different universities. Finally settled down, got married, started a job, started a family. And 25 years went by, and I did not know what was happening with the Paradoxical Commandments. I know now that what was happening is people were lifting them out of that little student council booklet, and they were putting them up on their walls, and putting them on refrigerator doors, and passing them to friends. And they travel all over the world. It's been estimated that as of today, millions of people have used the Paradoxical Commandments. I know from searching the web, they've been used by business leaders and government officials and military commanders and university presidents and teachers and even some rock stars, social workers, coaches, all kinds of people. I know they've been used by a lot of Rotarians and a lot of Rotary clubs. And when I first went on the web, guess where I found the first 3 Rotary sightings? Clubs in Malaysia, Hong Kong, and Alabama. Isn't that a great combination? Doesn't it make you feel proud to be part of an international movement? They've been used by Boy Scouts in Canada and the United States. They were used by a group of student leaders in South Africa, by the Cambodian free speech movement. They're on a website for Iranian news and culture. They were used by the former president of Zimbabwe. They were used by a Japanese Catholic priest in Tokyo, a homeless shelter in Philadelphia, a Methodist church in Kansas, a welfare agency in Texas, the Oklahoma Girls State Program, on and on and on. They're in a number of books. They're in John C. Maxwell's book, Becoming a Person of Influence. They're in Wayne Dyer's book, There's a Spiritual Solution to Every Problem. They're in Dr. Schuler's book, Turning Hurts into Halos. They were in Ann Landers. They were in the Reader's Digest. If you pull up Google to do a search and you type in the first phrase, people are illogical, unreasonable, self-centered, and just hit it, you'll get 4,500 websites. And those are just the guys that spelled the words correctly. And got them in the right order. There are at least 1,500 more websites. I have a favorite website. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't explain why this is my favorite website. It just makes me feel warm all over. I found the Paradoxical Commandments one day on the website of the English Cocker Spaniel Club of America. I mean no offense to anybody else's dog, but that just made me feel, good. The discovery that changed my life occurred at my Rotary Club meeting in September 1997, just up the street at the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. September 1997, my fellow Rotarian went to the podium to do the inspiration, and he noted that Mother Teresa had passed away. And he said that in her memory, he wanted to read a poem that she had written. So I bowed my head thoughtfully to listen and contemplate what he read. And what he read was 8 of the original 10 Paradoxical Commandments, exactly as I'd written them 30 years before. Well, I was pretty excited. I was calm. I didn't suddenly, whoa, like that. I was calm. I was dignified. I waited till the end of the meeting. And then I went up and I said to him after the meeting, I said, you know that piece that you read, where did you get that? And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, isn't it wonderful? And I said, well, actually, I wrote it. Right. Well, he was a Rotarian, so he was kind and courteous and thoughtful and didn't say a word. He did give me a look. I don't know what the look meant to him. To me, it meant, you poor self-delusional megalomaniac. That's what about the first of the four-way test? But he didn't say anything. He just stared at me, and I said, well, where did you get it? And he said, it was in a book about Mother Teresa. I said, do you know the title of the book? He said, well, no, actually, didn't know the title of the book. So I went to a bookstore, and there's a whole shelf of books about Mother Teresa. So I just started at the left, and I worked my way through page after page of every book about Mother Teresa until I found it. And it was on the last page before the appendix in a book called Mother Teresa, A Simple Path, compiled by Lucinda Vardy. It was retitled Anyway, which makes sense because each commandment ends with the word anyway. And it didn't say it was by Mother Teresa. What it said was, a sign on the wall of Shishu Bhavan, the children's home in Calcutta. So Mother Teresa thought the Paradoxical Commandments were important enough to put up on the wall to look at from time to time as she ministered to her children. And that really hit me. I mean, I'm standing there in the bookstore, I want to laugh, I want to cry, I want to scream, I want to jump up and down, I don't know what to do. That meant a lot to me. I think obviously because tremendous respect I have for Mother Teresa, but also I think because my wife and I adopted all three of our children from children's homes in Romania and Japan. And we've been in children's homes, and we know they can be heart-wrenching places, so that really meant a lot to me. And that was when I decided to start speaking and writing about the Paradoxical Commandments again after 30 years had passed. 30 years. The New York Times called me the Rip Van Winkle of inspirational gurus. I wrote something when I was 19, 30 years went by, and I suddenly woke up, whoa, well, look what happened. But it's been really amazing. Almost every day I get messages from people all over the world telling me what the Paradoxical Commandments mean to them, how they use them to raise their children, how they've used them to get through a difficult time at work, how they've used them to set their goals. And it's been a real blessing. I feel like I'm part of a growing network of kindred spirits, and I feel very fortunate. I think there are two reasons people kind of back into servant leadership. And remember, the first one was they choose the third option, to do what's right, to help people no matter how difficult it is, to live the Paradoxical Commandments. The second is I think servant leaders discover where to find the most meaning in life. What they learn is that the search for success and the search for meaning are not the same search. They can overlap, but they're not the same. The things that our secular commercial society pushes hard as symbols of success may provide relatively little personal meaning. For example, power. Power is a big symbol of success. But people learn there's more meaning in service than in power, more meaningful to help people than to just order them around. Wealth is a big symbol of success. But people learn over time that there is more meaning in just enjoying the richness of daily life. I mean, family and friends and hobbies and sunsets. Fame is a big symbol of success, but people know. They know there's more meaning in being known intimately to a few people than being known superficially to millions of people. Winning is a big symbol of success. People learn over time there's so much more meaning in always doing your personal best. No matter what, always doing your personal best. Now, there's nothing wrong with the symbols of success. I think that we've all been given gifts. We ought to work hard and be as successful as we can be. I don't get up in the morning and rush out to fail, okay? And I hope you don't either. The problem with the symbols of success is not that they're wrong. It's just that they're not enough. They're not enough when it comes to finding personal meaning. We need more than success. We need a more complete, more balanced, fuller life. And we need to pay attention to the sources of personal meaning to achieve that. I have a hobby. I've been surveying people. I've been asking them about the sources of personal meaning in their life. I've got about 2,000 survey forms back now. A lot of them are at the University of Hawaii, undergraduates and graduates, but I also have Army officers and civilians. I have Rotarians from my own club. I have YMCA staff members. I have some community and business leaders. And I don't have any random samples, so I can't extrapolate to a larger population. But I'm really interested in what I've learned from these 2,000 people. I've done 20 groups, and 19 of the 20 groups rated the same source of personal meaning highest. Okay, the highest rating went to the same source in 19 out of 20 groups, and that was family. And the one group that didn't put family highest put giving and receiving love the highest, and family was right behind. You know what always comes out high? On a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is low and 10 is high, the high 8s and 9s are always family, giving and receiving love, intimate relationships, doing my personal best, living my values, and a sense of accomplishment. Those are wonderful sources of personal meaning. Wonderful. It's also fascinating to see what gets a low rating. Power, wealth, fame, and winning. They're always down low, 3, 4, 5, 6. Occasionally at the business school we get money up to a 7. Okay? But they always rate low. I think people know where to find meaning. So the challenge is what? The challenge is to live as close to it as we can, to make sure we include those things in our lives. If I had to boil it down to just 4 things, I'd pick these. These are 4 things that I think are universal fundamental sources of personal meaning. I think they're found in the world's great religion, spiritual teaching, and the things we learn as we grow and experience life. You won't be surprised. Here they are. 1, love people. 2, help people. 3, live ethically. 4, don't be too attached to material things. Love people, help people, live ethically, don't be too attached to material things. I think there's probably a causal relationship here, because I think when you love people, you want to help them. And if you're loving people and helping people, you want to treat them right. You want to be ethical in the way you behave. And if you're focused on people, you're probably not too worried about material things. I think this says something about us as Rotarians. You know, when we serve others through Rotary, we are loving and helping other people. And we care about ethics. We've got the 4-way test. We've got our ethical code. That's important to us. And I know that we're not too attached to material things because we're always sharing our resources with huge positive impacts all around the world. All 4 of those fundamental universal sources of personal meaning are available to us through Rotary every day. That's important because when it comes to finding deep happiness, the most important question is not, am I a success or a failure? The most important question is not, is life hard or easy? The most important question is not, do people appreciate me? The most important question is my life meaningful? Is my life meaningful? As we serve others through Rotary, as we work hard as servant leaders in our clubs and our communities, we will find meaning. I promise. And we will be deeply happy. There are a lot of benefits to being a servant leader, living the paradoxical life, living the 4-way test. Let me just leave you with this one. If you focus on meaning, at the end of your life, when you look back, you're not going to have a lot of regrets. You may not have any. You're going to look back on a life filled with meaning. Even more important, you will not wonder why you have lived. You'll know. You'll know. And that may be the greatest blessing of all. Thank you.